So we've got a really great presentation here coming up from our great friends at Apple. We're going to be talking about best practices for implementing Mac. So I'd love to welcome onto the stage here Jeremy Butcher, part of Worldwide Product Marketing at Apple. Thank you, Jeremy. Real quick before we get started, there'll be Q&A at the end, and we've got microphones lined up here, so if you guys have any questions, do please feel free to line up behind them. Try to keep them generic. Don't make them just about maybe your specific tech problem, but about how Apple can help us here move the industry forward. So
cool.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks, man. All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you all for coming out. We're here to talk about best practices for implementing Mac. And so what I wanted to do to kind of get us started is actually take a little bit of a step back and talk about iPhone. Because when we sit around in Cupertino and we think about the phase that we're going through right now with Mac, we're actually seeing a lot of similar themes. And so the theme with iPhone was bring your own device. And the theme with the Mac is about choice. And at the end of the day, they're actually kind of the same thing. It's the choice of what you want to use to be the most productive. iPhone really rode the wave of employee choice. And our job, really, from a product perspective, was to do as much as we could to remove barriers that would enable IT to deploy iPhone. And so what do? Well, we focused on these four things. We built out things like VPN and 802.1x. We built out security features like encryption. We built MDM into the platform. We built deployment technologies like the device enrollment program. That worked out pretty well for us. As you know, today iOS devices are supported in 100% of the Fortune 500. And the other good news for us, but also for all of you, is that all of the things that I just mentioned have made their way to the Mac as well. So there's never been a better time to be deploying Macs within your organization. And like I said, the theme of employee choice is one that we feel really strongly about because, as has been talked about for the last couple days already, there's a lot of pent-up demand amongst employees to use Macs within your organizations. So that leads us to this interesting inflection point. It's kind of like where we were with iOS a few years ago, where we still have the conversation about why we should do it, but it's less and less about why we should support Mac and more about how to do it. And so that's what I want to spend some time focusing on with all of you today is a framework that is based off of some of the conversations that we've had with customers that we think can help make you successful with what you do. So stop me if you've heard about this deployment story. It seems to be our favorite theme of the week already. But Mac at IBM has been this huge success that we have very publicly stated about the process that they went through. And so we wanted to give a little bit of our take on what we think some of the most interesting components of that are. But also, like we said, or like I said, we've kind of generalized it a little bit in a way that we think can apply to a lot of different organizations, not just the IBMs of the world. So what you see here is kind of the pillars of what IBM has told us was their approach to going about Mac at IBM. And it was to give employees the device they wanted. As Fletcher said in the video from the keynote this morning, he's not the Mac guy, he was the technology guy. And so his job was not necessarily about bringing Macs into the organization, it was about enabling choice. And so we think that's a really big benefit. The second piece of this, and I would argue maybe one of the most important, is managing and provisioning in a modern way. We talked about, again, this a little bit at the keynote this morning of using the Mac as an opportunity to rethink some of the things that you do within IT. Driving self-sufficiency within the environment from a support perspective, in our view, is really all about taking advantage of choice. The employees that are going to be using Macs chose to use Macs. So take advantage of the fact that this is something they want to use and bring them in to participate in the support of their product. Rely on them to get more up to speed and things like that. And really this focuses on an employee-centric approach, which, as you've heard from IBM, leads to a lower total cost of ownership. So let's look at those three pillars: employee choice, modern provisioning, and self-sufficiency, and see what that kind of led to. Again, I'm not going to belabor the IBM story because many of you know it better than everybody else around the world. But the reality is, when you have employee choice, the program grows really quickly because, as IBM has stated and Jamf has stated, upwards of 75% of employees out there want to use a Mac. Even if it's 50%, like Miles said from Walmart, that's a huge amount of people that are going to be demanding this kind of experience. And again, rely on the fact that they want it and that they probably have a Mac at home with the way that you go about getting them up and running. How quickly can you make them productive? How little amount of training do you have to provide because they already know how to use an iPhone or an iPad or a Mac? So we've seen, obviously, with IBM, it surges. And then the other thing that IBM has done really well in this modern provisioning concept is they built services that scale really well. So zero-touch deployment process, ship the device to the user, rely on somebody like Jamf to do device management or to create an experience, as Dean mentioned today. Do away with imaging. And go down the path of relying as much as you can on the built-in security functionality of the Mac. And these are things that almost every one of them is going to be a change compared to the way that you manage a PC today. And so there's going to be a lot of, well, this is the way we've always done it, that you'll have to confront with folks as you go down the path of trying to create a better experience. And then what this yields ultimately, and you saw some of this from Fletcher, is a reduction in help desk cost, which leads to a lower total cost of ownership story. But really, it means that you can get by with less people supporting, and you can have a better first-time call resolution because you enable your employees to do a lot without even need to call you. And you can also focus on providing feedback back into the organization about, hey, this is our top call driver. Maybe we should build a process that makes this self-service instead of requiring help desk support in order to accomplish the task at hand. So that's IBM. Very briefly, the thing that I think IBM has done incredibly well is they have kept everybody on the same page for what the original vision was. I know many of you have either gone through a process like this or you're in the midst of it. And as I said during the keynote, you kind of get past the point of convincing people that you should do it. And I know some of you are like thinking I'm crazy that that's even the case because you're right in the midst of convincing people that you should do it. But once you get past that, the next phase that you move into is basically making sure that you're able to maintain the vision that you have for how it should be done. Because everybody's going to come along with their set of requirements that's going to start to chip away at the experience that you want to deliver to the user. And that's where you kind of constantly need to be going back to people and reminding them, here's why we're doing this, here's what we're trying to accomplish. And like I said, I think IBM has done that incredibly well. We've seen a lot of customers that come in and say, we want to be the next IBM, here's how we're going to go about doing it. And it's basically the path that they were taking before, but now with a Mac. And so really take this opportunity to kind of push in a new direction. So let's talk about this framework that we've put together. It's 5 simple steps. If you do this, it'll all be a piece of cake. But the idea is really that this is just a framework. We know that everything's kind of unique to your organization, but there's some truths in here that we think apply quite broadly. The first set of things is really basics. So a lot of this you'll be saying, yes, we understand this. But I think the thing that we want to kind of really focus on here is starting with the why and constantly go back to why. There's a lot of different interpretations from the different folks that you're going to talk to about why you're doing it. And you need to make sure that everybody's on the same page with what those things are. Because like I said, you can go past whether or not we should do it, and if everybody walks out of the room with a different reason why you're doing it, they're all going to approach the problem in a different way, or the challenge, I should say. The other thing that I want to focus on is many of you already support iOS within your organization. A Mac is more like an iOS device than a PC. So leverage your knowledge of how iOS works in your deployment of Mac. For us, and this might not be the first thing that everybody in your organization thinks of, but the reason why to do this really focuses on enhancing productivity, helping employees be more engaged, actually attracting and retaining talent, and improving the perception of IT within your organization. We think those are really great reasons. We know there's not a dollar amount that you can put on each one of these things, but if you can kind of have that at the core of what you're doing, we know that the dollars will work themselves out, as evidenced by a bunch of different folks that you guys have all heard from already this week. So if you have this in mind, we think that you can kind of head down the right path and let the rest of it kind of come together. This is, again, kind of one of those obvious things, but assemble the right team. There's a whole list of folks that are on this slide that really kind of culminate with the message of it's going to take a village, right? We talked about in the keynote today, get to know the admins, get to know InfoSec, get to know your partners and resellers and things like that. It's not that this is a Mac-specific thing, right? This is any time you're trying to make change within your organization, you want to get everybody together and moving in the same direction. And so this is really about organizational change more than it is about the Mac. Of course, you want to engage with existing Mac users. As Ryan mentioned during the keynote, go out to existing PC users as well. Try to understand what it is that is preventing them from moving in this direction. I think that's kind of the main point here, which is really just you have a lot of folks that are in your camp already outside of IT, and so take advantage of that. All right, so that's the basics. The next piece of this is really kind of the nuts and bolts of getting Mac approved on your network. And so we've had this story for quite a while now. We use it with iPhone as well as the Mac, but it's this fits in, stands out kind of concept. The good news is, like I said, we've built in a bunch of technology into the Mac that helps it connect to your Exchange environment. It helps connect to your network. There's all sorts of different technology that's built in to just fit right in with what you do. But it also stands out from a user perspective in a way that is intuitive and easy for them to use, helps them get productive right out of the gate. And of course, because of the ecosystem that we've created with Apple devices, works incredibly well with iPhone and iPad. But there's another version of Mac standing out, which is some of the stuff that we've already talked about, which is it's not a PC, and that's okay. We should accept that and embrace it and use this as an opportunity to think about the way that we can manage the Mac differently than the PC. And so if there's one thing that I can tell you is, like I said during the keynote, really question everything that people tell you about how something needs to be accomplished. And you all know that there's a tactful way to do that and a non-tactful way to do that. But really just kind of push and say, okay, I understand that that's what you are telling me that we need to do, but what are you actually trying to accomplish with that policy that we need to push down, or that thing that we need to turn off, or this privilege that we need to enable or disable? And you can really start to get at the heart of what folks are trying to accomplish, and then say, hey, well, the Mac actually does that in a very different way. Does this kind of approach solve the same problem that you were concerned about? Well, yeah, it actually does. Well, great, let's do that, and it's going to be a better experience for our users at the same time. And so there's a lot of that I think folks can kind of embrace with the fact that the Mac is actually different from a PC. A couple more kind of relatively straightforward things. Establish a management solution. I think you kind of know the solution that you might want to look for. Folks at Jamf here might have some opinions on which one you should choose. We think that's great. But really look at the way that you can automate as much as possible, manage accounts and policies, and take advantage of everything that management does on the platform. The other component of this is a security strategy. We talked about InfoSec and other folks already, but the idea that you need to put together a security approach is probably going to be more challenging for you than the deployment and management approach. That's the place where there's probably the most existing dogma around the way that things should be done that you're going to want to push through. And again, I think the key thing for us is educating people on how much is built in to the Mac already. You might not need to go off and install 12 different agents on the Mac to accomplish the same level of security that you had somewhere else. I think folks would argue you might not even need to do that on other platforms, but you definitely don't need to do it on the Mac. And so again, take this opportunity to rethink the way that you do something specifically around security. With apps, I think the message that we want to communicate here is break the task up into chunks. So start with core productivity apps. What do the majority of your users need to use every single day? Well, it's things like Office, it's email, calendar, and contacts, it's file sharing, it's communication apps, it's backup. How much of your population does that actually satisfy their software needs for? Probably a big chunk. And even if it doesn't satisfy the needs 100% for all of those people, it's probably what they do the majority of the time. And so are there apps that they use monthly or quarterly or whatever the case may be that aren't necessarily compatible yet that you can give them an alternative solution for? But we've seen a lot of people take a look at the app availability or compatibility story and say, well, until I have 100% of everything ready to go, I can't even start down the process, because this edge case will really cause problems. And our feedback there is don't let that prevent you from at least moving forward. Make this an iterative approach. And start with these core productivity apps. But ultimately, you want to make sure that the kind of main internal apps are also compatible. So things like directory, the corporate intranet, expense management. These are the things that the people might not use all the time, although directory, we all know, is one of those things that everybody uses every day. But there's a certain level of kind of iteration that we can approach this with to enable folks to get up and running and then give them more and more capability over time. And then the last component of this is there are going to be some legacy apps that are cost prohibitive to modernize. Let's take advantage of the next time that those are going to be refreshed generally. Or maybe we have a stopgap in place through something like virtualization. But that's obviously not the place you start. It's the place that you kind of say, okay, this is our last resort. We're going to give people access, but we want to do it in a way that's kind of best and native first. People are wanting a Mac for a reason. If you then just turn around and present them with a PC experience on a Mac, they're not going to be satisfied with what you're delivering to them. But like I've said, we've heard from a lot of folks, and 3,000 is the number that you see on this slide that IBM had that were internal. We've heard numbers upwards of like 10,000. And some of you in the audience probably have even higher numbers of internal apps that need to work on a Mac. The question you should ask yourself is, do all 10,000 or 3,000 or whatever the case may be really need to work on a Mac every single day for all of our users? Think about segmenting your users. Think about taking it in chunks. And the task becomes a lot more manageable in terms of app compatibility. And then the other component of this, and this is something that we've seen quite a bit, is the idea that you need to treat software, even your own internal software, more like a product. There is this idea within a lot of IT app development that it's a project. I have budget for Q1 of this year. I'm going to create this app, and then we're going to be done. We all know that the software world doesn't work that way anymore. Things are constantly evolving. And so I'm not saying that you don't do the same kind of budgeting process that you do, but plan for going back and updating apps. Go plan for testing apps on a regular basis. Treat it like it's a product and think about the experience that you want to have for people when we as a platform introduced a new API that you really want to take advantage of. Well, but we didn't set aside budget for the next version of macOS, so I guess we'll never get that. And so just think about this a little bit more kind of as a constant process. And I don't say that in a way to kind of overwhelm you of, okay, now I have to touch all these things all the time. But we all know that that's just kind of the way that things are moving from a software perspective, right? I mean, some of the top apps on the App Store are updating, I think, every like 10 to 14 days. They're just constantly iterating. And so I'm not saying you have to get to 10 to 14 days, but think about more than just one and done when you think about the things that you're building from a software perspective. The other component of this is that you can let demand drive your prioritization. We've seen organizations that do really interesting things with the feedback that they get from their users, where every user gets 3 votes on what they should be working on next. So not unlimited votes. It's not American Idol. You can't just keep calling and voting for your favorite. But you get 3. And so you vote on the 3 that you want. And if something better comes along, you take your vote back from the other one, you give it to the other thing, and it helps you prioritize what it is to do next. Because I can tell you, the guarantee that I can make for you is as soon as you ship something to your Apple device population, you're going to get feedback on ways to improve it and what they want you to do next. So just be ready for that and be ready to iterate. Modern provisioning is the next piece of this. And this is actually another area where I think approaching this as though it was a product is the right way to go. So the kind of traditional model, as you all know, and is still probably the case in some of your environments for other platforms, is IT makes a purchasing decision, it's shipped to a warehouse, it's imaged, it's preloaded with a bunch of software, you get something that's pretty static, and it's delivered to the user as you intended it to be used. Ryan talked about this idea of like audience segmentation. So the finance people get this exact image with no customization depending on what kind of productivity they may need. So we think there's this really interesting new model which is driven by employee choice, enabling the user to order on demand. As you saw in a bunch of these use cases, it's drop shipped to the user in the shrink wrap. You rely on things like the device enrollment program to set up the device in an automated way, and then ultimately enable the device to be personalized, things like self-service, through app recommendations and other things like that. So we think it's a really interesting model that removes both a lot of work from an IT perspective, right? You're not shipping this to a kitting facility to do a bunch of work. And it actually creates a really great experience for the user. They're taking the device out of the box. It's like you bought it just for them, which you did, and so they should feel that way. And so, obviously, device enrollment program is a huge component of that for us in terms of the success of this. So being able to automate MDM enrollment. MDM then kicks in and does all the heavy lifting. I always kind of speak about the device enrollment program as the fast lane to get onto the highway. The MDM server really gets you where you want to go, and what DEP does is just makes you get there as quickly and efficiently as possible. At that point, you give the ability for the users to set things up themselves, and you don't need to go down the path of laying down a monolithic system image. We think the idea of self-service is great. One of the things that I want to challenge you to do in your provisioning process is think about what people must have before they can start being productive. The first step that we see some people take away from imaging into this more modern model is, well, I'll just push down all the software that you're ever going to need at the time that you set it up. And I'm going to block you from using the device until I've pushed down gigs and gigs of content. Well, I might not need all that content right away. So think about what it is that they must have in order to be productive so that they can get up and running as quickly as possible. The last thing you want is a setup experience that says, hey, we'll be done setting up your Mac in a couple hours, so go grab a coffee and talk with your friends. It's not the best experience. And this is what I mean when I talk about thinking about this like a product. What's the experience that you want to create for your users when they take the product out of the box? As you know, we spend a ton of time thinking about this at Apple, and we would love for you to do the same kind of thing in terms of kind of extending what we've done into your own environments. And so self-service can be a great way to give things to people on demand. Not only apps, but settings. They can open support tickets. They can get help from a documentation perspective. It really proves to be a super helpful thing for you to be in a more real-time, on-demand support model. And then the last piece of this, again, thinking about this from a product perspective and really thinking about it holistically, is thinking through all the steps of the hardware lifecycle. Don't just think about deployment. What's the experience like when they go to the intranet to order the Mac in the first place? Is it some old site that you leveraged in order to facilitate e-commerce, or is it something that feels like a modern experience where they have a store that they could buy things from and really have a great experience around the acquisition? And then on the kind of end of this, when you refresh a device, this is part of the TCO conversation as well, but the residual value of a Mac is great. So take advantage of that. Look at things like leasing, look at things like stipends, look at things like payroll deductions, and be creative about the way that you can get these things into the hands of your employees in a way that ultimately makes financial sense for all of you. So the last piece of this that I will touch on is around support. And we talked about this a little bit with the IBM section, which is around driving self-sufficiency, taking advantage of the fact that these employees want to use these devices in the first place, so put some ownership on them. We've heard from some folks that the idea of self-service means that they're kind of putting the work on the employee in a negative way. IT should really be doing that thing that self-service may be doing. That's fine. You can call it whatever you want. But the idea that the user can be self-sufficient has nothing to do with whether or not you're doing the right amount of work from an IT perspective. So build the communities that help them be more successful. We all know that the last thing that we want to do as consumers is pick up the phone and call someone to get support in our personal lives. We'd rather Google it, or we'd rather find something, or call a friend. And so take advantage of those behaviors that people just naturally have. They want to text in for support because it's asynchronous. I can text somebody, they might respond back in 15 minutes, but I haven't had to wait on hold for 15 minutes. I've been able to do other stuff. So take advantage of these modern ways that people want to get access to information. And like I said, a big component of this is peer-to-peer support. So one of the interesting things we've seen with a lot of customers in the spirit of like the Genius Bar is even a step before that, build out champions within different organizations. Be known as the Mac person within your area of the office, that people can come by and say, hey, I had this quick question. I can't find the printer. What's the deal? Oh, you just click here. And that's a call that doesn't come back to the support desk. It's resolved really quickly. And again, generally, folks are more satisfied with that approach. It does obviously help quite a bit to make sure that you have Apple-specific knowledge about how all this stuff works amongst your help desk, but also, as we've talked about earlier, this concept of the physical help desk where people can go and get support. You've seen probably in different organizations the vending machine that has the cables and the chargers and things like that. Again, it's all about empowering the user to do as much as they can. Focus on first call resolution, like I said, and also really make sure that you route the feedback that you're getting back into the technical teams that need to help you with the top call driver being a forgotten password. Well, why don't we just build a website where they can reset their password? Think about those kind of things that you can start to chip away at to improve your own process. I want to give a quick shout out to our documentation. So what you see on the screen here in the URL is actually more focused on you. It's the deployment reference that we have for the Mac. There's another side of this, which is the Mac user guide. It's where consumers go to learn how to use their Mac. It's all online, and it's all linkable. So if you are thinking about creating an intranet that would help people find information about how to do different things with their Mac, like change the wallpaper or customize a screensaver or something like that, we've already written it. So just use ours. And that way when it changes, you don't have to go back and update it for the High Sierra screenshot compared to the Sierra screenshot, which you may never do anyway, but we love the fact that it's all up to date, and hopefully so do you. So I want to let you know that you can literally grab these links out of Safari and paste them right into your help intranet. That goes along with knowledge-based articles as well, but this is really the step-by-step of how to use your Mac that you can take advantage from us directly. The last component of the support strategy is really around leveraging AppleCare. It's a great group that can really help you get to the bottom of a lot of different things. You can get an account manager that's kind of dedicated to helping you out. And ultimately, there's a lot of different options with the way that you can get help from AppleCare. We've made a lot of changes over the last few years to really have enterprise-grade help desk and replacement type services. So encourage you to take another look at that as something that can really be a super help to extend what you can do from an IT perspective. So I'll just kind of close it out by recapping some of the main learnings here from us, at least, that we hope help you out as well, which is remember why you're going down the path of doing choice and constantly remind people why you're doing it to help you stay on track. From an approval perspective, question why something needs to be done in a certain way. With apps, like I said, break it up into chunks. Smaller tasks, make it more manageable, and you can iterate very quickly. From a provisioning perspective, treat it like a product. How can you make the experience the best experience possible? Keep pushing your teams and yourself to make that experience as great as you can. And then from a support perspective, take advantage of the fact that choice will naturally lend itself to self-sufficiency and embrace that. We think those are really solid learnings that we've had, like I said, not only from just this more recent expansion of Mac in enterprise, but from the learnings that we've had from helping customers deploy Apple devices within their organizations for really the past decade. And so we hope that it's super helpful for you as well. And with that, I'll end my time here today. So thank you all very much.
Let's give Jeremy a big round of applause. Thank you.